All right, thank you. A warm welcome to those attending and to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is the meeting, or a meeting, of the Corporate Resources and Infrastructure Select Committee. My name is Councillor John Riley and I'm the chairman of this meeting. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and online under the live broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you will be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. A reminder to councillors, officers and those speaking today that you should turn the microphone button on when speaking. This will ensure you can be heard in the room and by those watching online. A little bit of housekeeping. We're not expecting any fire drills this evening, so if any alarms do go off, please follow officers to the fire exits out of the building to the designated meeting points. For those in the room, please switch off or put on silent mobile devices before the meeting starts. Please note that councillors on the committee may use laptops or tablets or indeed phones during the meeting to view the agenda and paperwork. So just to introduce everybody, can we go around the table, starting with Matthew and coming around this way, please?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Matthew Walbridge. I'm the Chief Digital and Information Officer for Hillingdon Council.
Evening all, Darren Sword, Head of Digital for Hillingdon Council.
Hello, I'm Ian Anderson. I'm the Business Manager for Complaints and Inquiries.
Councillor Narinda Garg.
Hello, Councillor Elagarelig.
Councillor Stuart Mathers. Councillor Farhad Chubdar.
Councillor Philip Cawthorne. Councillor Kaushik Banerjee.
Anisha Tedri, Democratic Services.
All right, thank you. So, to the agenda, put that over there, and apologies for absence.
Apologies from Councillor Bennett with Councillor Cawthorne substituting.
You're very welcome, Councillor Cawthorne, and thank you for substituting. And that went, thank you, and that went, came before us, which was interesting, talking about the extent to which we are investing in electronic vehicle infrastructure and charging, and that's all set out there. Then at item 19, we looked at the communications update and got further information about that. And we noted the contents of the report with regard to those issues. Are those minutes agreed? Okay, thank you. So we move on, and two items that, all right, confirming that items of business marked in Part 1 will be considered in public, and that the items in Part 2 will be considered in private, but I don't think we've got any Part 2 items this evening, as we very rarely do have. Right, so item 5 and 6 are the sort of main highlights for this evening, which senior officers come to talk to us about. So we'll start with item 5, which is on page 5 of our papers, the draft Hillingdon Digital Strategy, and Matthew is going to introduce this. Thank you.
Evening, everybody. So in front of you is the Council's draft digital strategy for the next 3 years. I really appreciate your time to review some of this, to give us some input ahead of it being presented to the Cabinet for final sign-off of the digital strategy. So where are we in terms of digital? Well, you've had me in front of you talking about digital over previous meetings, and this is the culmination of where we're going as a council moving forward. So what does it mean to be digital? So in terms of where we want to go, this is delivering one of our key ambitions as a council to be a modern, well-efficient council. And we've been fortunate enough to be given an amount of money from the council to be able to deliver some of these aims and ambitions, and this sets out where we want to go over the next 3 years. In terms of how we're going to do it, and it's really important that our number one principle to delivering the digital strategy is prioritising customer needs. So what this focuses on, what customers really need, helping our residents, helping our customers to deliver the things that they need to do as part of their lives digitally. It's really important that local government and councils move ahead to where the private sector are, to give us 24/7, 365 experience, so people can access council services whenever they need them, on the device that they need them, and therefore the investment that we've already got will help to accelerate that journey to prioritise our customer needs. In doing that, one of our priorities is to carry out an agile approach to delivery. Now, that sounds a slightly technical term, but that means in terms of our delivery, we want to move things quickly, we want to respond to customer needs, and we want to iterate what we do, recognising that in old approaches to particularly IT, is you put in an IT system, it lies there, sits there for 3 years, 5 years, then you go and get a new one. The world's moved on since then, and we know that the accelerated approach to digital, particularly through generative AI, means technology is moving at a greater pace than it ever has done in the world. So we need to embrace agility as an organisation and change things more rapidly as we go. The third principle is we want to drive new business models driven by data, and I'm passionate about the use of data in the council to make sure we're making better decisions based on real-time evidence, and we're investing in that as we speak to make sure we're driving better decisions. We're using the plethora of information we've got as a council to drive better officer decisions, to make better recommendations for residents, better recommendations for members, but more fundamentally going back to prioritise customer needs by giving better assessment of them from a numerical perspective. And also we want to take one council approach as well, rather than seeing a lot of siloed services at the moment. We want to take a one council approach to delivering customer needs. Recognising that over the last few years we've actually made strides forward in terms of what we're doing in the digital space. So as you'll see in the main report in 7A, that we were the first UK local authority to deploy automated voice and web chat solution at scale. That's now a couple of years old, and we want to mature our offer to make it again more fit for modern customer needs. But that has helped to reduce budgets, and it's helped to more residents to self-serve. And we've seen great strides in making sure that residents can self-serve across the council. We've got a really good, modern, flexible infrastructure, and we've reduced the number of IT applications. So that means we've got a good, solid foundation base to mature our offer moving forward. As most organisations, we've implemented hybrid working, so post-pandemic, so we've got good devices, we've got a flexible workforce, people can work out in the field, they can access the things they need to, and we've got a more modern offering that makes sure that officers can be more productive than they were prior to the pandemic. And also in terms of what does it mean out in the communities, we've also improved our connectivity. So we were pretty poor at this as Hillingdon. So back in 2020 we only had 5% coverage. Now we've got 75% coverage of connectivity across our area. So we were one of the worst. Now we're in the top half of London Borough, so we've really improved what we're doing in terms of connectivity. But where are we going? It's not what we've done, it's where we're going. So the strategy sets 5 priority areas, which my head of digital, Darren, will talk through and give some examples of what does that mean out for our residents and our customers. So over to you, Darren.
Thank you, Matthew. Evening again all. So I'll walk us through these 5 work streams and try and give a bit of real-life examples as to our ambition and what we're trying to achieve. So the first is quite obvious. It's building services online by default. Now, people are used to the modern way of working. If you think about how you transact with your bank or Amazon or even your delivery company, it's the same kind of impact we want to have in terms of Hillingdon. So when you go into your My Account, it's not just viewing the things that are kind of set all over the place. It's having a more joint-up approach. So if you think of when you move into the borough, it's not just I want to sign up for council tax or register for council tax. It's asking you questions like, do you have a family? Where do you live? So we can start kind of proactively showing local services. So things like local parks, things like parking, things that are more meaningful to residents all in one place. It's when you register, not just having to tell several different departments, it's actually one and done. You tell electoral services, parking, all the key services that you need to tell. More than that, it's that proactive approach. So it's not waiting or coming to the council website to find out something if something's gone wrong or you need more information. So, for example, waste collection over holiday periods, the days change, people forget. It's proactively messaging people to say, don't forget, put your bins out today rather than tomorrow. It's those types of things that we want to build in the technology. The other side of the coin is having a better website, easier to navigate, find information online straight away, easily. As Matthew said, with the Gen AI piece, there's a lot of technology we can leverage to make that happen. So that's what we want to build in. Other good examples are when you apply for a service, you probably know it yourselves, you have to provide proof of your residency several times over. Why would you do that when we already hold that data? So it's how we build on that data to spread that across each council service, which ultimately makes it easier for residents, guests, businesses to transact with us. So that's really where we want to get to in terms of building our services online by default. Better data, better decisions. So that ties into what I said before and what Matthew was saying earlier. It's building on that data and how we actually use that to make our decisions. So, as Matthew says, we have a lot of data at our fingertips. So thinking about something like voids or repairs, it's using that data rather than as it stands now, you need a repair, you call the contact centre, they have to log a repair, or first they have to diagnose it, log a repair. Hopefully they get that diagnosis right. If they don't, someone has to come back into the office, raise another repair. That's not how we want the future to be. It's using that data to diagnose the issue. In fact, it's to diagnose it before it's even happened. So things like Internet of Things, sensors on boilers, so it automatically tells us as a council, actually you may need to go and do a boiler check on that, so residents aren't having to do it. Also helps us plan our assets longer term. So that's where we're talking about using that data for insights. And Ian, is going to talk about complaints later. It's how we take that customer feedback and feed that into the loop. So everything is customer-centric. We're using that feedback to design our services. Modernise our infrastructure and systems. So we're on a journey right now. So we mentioned before around the automation in terms of voice. That's great. That takes us so far in that it pushes you to the website to go and self-serve. What we want in the future is you can self-serve over the phone or more so on the internet. So, what position am I on the housing register? Not, okay, go and check online, log into a portal. Following on from some security checks, you can get that type of information at the touch of your fingertips. That's kind of where we want to get to. We want to take control back. We want to develop our own systems and processes so we're not reliant on major companies for that. So again, we can join all of these things together and make it more seamless, but that's what we want to do in terms of our modernisation programme. Building digital capability and inclusion. I think the clear thing we recognise is not everyone is going to use our services online. So I always think of it from a point of view, we want to make it easier for those who can transact online to free up resource for the most vulnerable people to be able to get hold of our customer service staff. And that's what we want to go down the line of. If you make it easier for people to transact with us 24/7, 365 days a week, and you proactively do things, that means we should decrease our demand. And as I say, there's so many benefits that goes alongside. And delivering a digital place. So I think I touched on this before in terms of or Matthew did, connectivity, more sensors. We're already exploring what we can do, and there's with the way technology is right now, you've got sensors for lights, sensors for potholes. In our care homes, you can put sensors in place that help recognise if someone needs help. So we all know pendant alarms. That's like, 20, 30 years ago. If you think about what the future is in terms of technology, that's what we're striving to do with that digital place. Matthew, I think it's fair to say that we've got some ties with big local organisations, universities, as a means of delivering that too, as part of the West London Alliance as well. So it's how we link all of this together and really leverage the power that we've got as Hillingdon, as a council. So those are the 5 work streams. I our measurements are things that we'll be working on. So this definitely is an iterative process that we'll go through. But the most basic things are we want to see our measurements of things like reducing customer contact. So measuring actually how many times we get things done first time rather than people having to call up to raise an issue. You know, it should be done through this automation. Try and increase and maximise self-service take-up, because we know in the world we live in, and especially as generations move on, you know, people are becoming more technically au fait with how systems and technology works. So that's a good measurement, and it's easy to measure, to be fair. Our spend on customer experience is something we can measure. Our spend on business support, and then our total spend on printing and postage, because again, that's something that we want to digitise, like e-billing, e-notifications. There's no real need for paper, which is quite costly. Instead, e-billing notifications, like a bank, you know, you get a text every week what your balance is. It's the same premise. A delivery, you know, you can follow your driver, your number 3 in the queue. Same thing for repair, same thing for anyone out on the street. You can actually follow them through the borough. And that's where we want to get to with this strategy over the next 3 years, and that's the level of investment that we've obviously got to do that. Matthew, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that.
No, thanks, Darren. If it's okay with you, Chair, we're open it to questions. We really appreciate your input into this as part of the strategy ahead of going to Cabinet. So any input you've got, we'll take away. We'll go and look at the strategy and make amendments ahead of Cabinet.
So with any sort of rollout of programs, usually you have a test case scenario. So I just wanted to focus more on, I understand you're using universities and things, but those people are quite IT literate at working their way around websites. So have you got a varied focus group or someone that you're going to try going through the systems with and get feedback from before you roll it out completely?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of this understanding customer needs is involving our customers and our residents in the design of our services. So that's not just in testing the website, that's doing user research to understand what services they need. It would be fair to say, as a council, we don't understand well enough our resident needs at the moment, so we're going to go out and physically work with our residents. But when it comes to going through, and I'll try and use non-technical terms, the alpha and the beta approach, so understanding how you're testing the applications we'll be putting out, we'll be involving our users and our residents, because and that's not just in the rollout, that's as Darren said, that's an iterative process. We want to involve people all the time. You know, technology is again moving so quickly, and a large amount of this is about us taking control of the things we're rolling out, so we can change them, we can improve them as we go. So we will be heavily involved in users and residents throughout the whole journey. That's right from the very start of understanding user needs, right before we roll out something, and then post having rolled out something, is we will continue to test it, continue to get feedback. So we'll be putting feedback loops into the products we develop as well. So again, a bit like Ian with complaints, is we're taking that information and we're improving things as we go. So that's part of what we'll do in terms of our methodology, and we'll be following the government digital services methodology for the design of what we do, which again is aligned to user feedback testing, so all the things you're stating. So yes, that is absolutely key to what we do.
All right, Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and I very much welcome the report. This is absolutely what we need to be doing. We need to be heading in this direction. And it should be a positive. And the report points out that there are people out there who actively want this kind of digital engagement process that they can latch onto, and I think that's to be welcome. But it does have to be fit for purpose, absolutely it has to be. And I welcome the assurance that's been given about the engagement with residents, and I think as the IT-enabled ones, there's people like me who are kind of fairly middling, who want to go on a journey to sort of learn all I can, are capable of doing it with a bit of support. And it's important that you're engaging with people like that. My question, I suppose, is around those people who are never likely to be able to access services online, and the assurance that we've had in the past from Cabinet is that where that is the case, those people will be identified and supported with some human contact. Can I just sort of ask for any comment on that? I assume that is still the case. And how will it work in practice, please? Because you do still hear from people who have a default position of picking up the phone and don't always have the best of experiences. So how should that be working, please? Thank you.
Yeah, a really good question. And again, the fourth priority is build digital capability and inclusion. So digital inclusion is a massive part of what we do. So that's about, there are people that ring the council up at the moment that if we provided better online services, or in fact knew about them, and a big point that we need to get across is we need to communicate better with our residents to tell them what we've got. I describe us as a bit of a shy council. We don't talk about our successes, or we don't necessarily talk about the things that are out there at the moment. There was a good example of our e-books offer in the libraries that not many people know about, and we put it out in the press, and we've seen an uptake in use because people didn't know it was there. So there'll be people like me that don't particularly want to physically go to libraries and go out and get physical books, right? I want it on my Kindle, I want it on my iPad. So we've got the ability to do that. So some of it is about our communication. Some of it's about our engagement, is to make sure we're taking people on the journey with us. If we take people on the journey with us, they own some of the changes we're doing as a council. But there will always be people that can't interact with us. So at the moment, through our customer experience team, we prioritise our vulnerable customers, so the people that ring us up that need our help the most, so they get prioritised queuing, so they need our help quickest, they need more in-depth conversations, and they need our help the soonest. So we prioritise those, and over time we want to more just focus on our vulnerable residents. By doing that, we'll be digitising things to make sure we're 24/7, 365 across all of our customer experiences. We also recognise that people don't always have the devices, connectivity, or the skills to be able to interact with the council. And it's not just about interacting with the council. It's being digital is part of what benefits you in your everyday life. So not just how you interact with the council. It helps you financially. It helps you to access other services. So and there's a financial benefit just by being online for any resident. So what we'll be doing when we'll be rolling out our new devices is we're recycling 500 of them. We'll be giving them out to community groups and our vulnerable residents. We'll also be giving them the skills, so giving them some learning and development training to help them do that, and we'll be giving them the connectivity, so a package of those things to help our communities. And more fundamentally, as a council, we've got scarce resources, as all public services do at the moment with the budget challenges we all face. We need to focus our scarce resources on the people that help the most. So those vulnerable people that that are never going to be able to interact with us online, we need to help them, whether that's face-to-face or on the telephone, and give high-quality conversations. But recognising that this is a strategy, and it's a medium-term strategy, that people are becoming more and more au fait. So whereas 10 years ago you wouldn't think 70, 80-year-olds would be able to interact with council services online. Well, now if you're 70 or 80, you're pretty easily being able to access digital services now. So we're at a point in time, and this is a direction that all public services, and we want to accelerate our journey in that to make sure that we're putting more and more digital services. We're giving people, as well as our own officers, the skills, because it's not just about the residents. We've got to skill up our own officers to be able to use the digital technology that we have in the best possible way at the moment, because the more productive, the more efficient we are, the better services we're going to be given to our vulnerable residents. So it's multifaceted, and we're absolutely passionate about digital inclusion as a council.
All right, Councillor Jibadar first, and then Councillor Gaelic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had a look at the programme of connectivity improvements, and I'm wondering how many sites do we have, and is the improvement across site-to-site communication? Or could you elaborate what improvements you are doing?
Yeah, so as the report said, we started off with a fairly low base in terms of connectivity across the borough, and we've massively improved it. There are still some spots across the borough that we need to improve our connectivity. We've got some restrictions around the south of the borough, with Heathrow recognising that we're not going to get to full coverage. So in partnership with the West London Alliance, we are working sub-regionally to roll out our connectivity. So we both get funding and support to be able to do that. And this is making sure that you've got 5G technology across the borough, which is of benefit to everybody, businesses, residents, what we do. We know that in terms of connectivity, that's going to be a consistent challenge in terms of us as an area. and particularly important for our residents, but also our economy as well in terms of what we're doing. And as we move to 6G, which will obviously be down the track, and then 7G, is we need to keep up with those improvements. So we need to make sure that we've got great connectivity, but connectivity isn't just about the infrastructure. Connectivity is about what you've got as an individual, and particularly if you're vulnerable, if you're of low income, then you might have some connectivity challenges in terms of your own device. So it's both what we need to do in a whole borough perspective, but it also boils down to the individual, making sure the individual can access, because again, that's the digital inclusion angle. If you haven't got connectivity as a person, you haven't got a mobile phone, you can't afford it, or you don't have the ability to do it. We want to give businesses the ability to connect, have fast connectivity to what we do, but also the individuals the connectivity as well. So we're constantly striving. We've made great improvements. We've got a consistent plan. We actually have a post in my team dedicated to improving the connectivity, and we're doing site by site. We look at where there are connectivity gaps, particularly around our council services, things like schools, making sure that our outstations have connectivity. So we constantly strive to improve that, and it's a really good partnership as well across the place as well, because obviously it's linked to infrastructure improvements in terms of where we want to go from an economic terms in terms of the borough. So I find it really exciting. It's really important. It's one of the things that we don't talk about that much as a council, but we're really caught up with some of the best places, across London now, and we strive to get better and better at doing it.
All right, Councillor Garrick.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a two-part question. One is concerning the systems or infrastructure. I know you've got this purpose-built contact system for Hillingdon. Are there any other programs like that, or are we going to use something that's already existing, or use the company who specializes in this field? And also, because I'm first of this committee, did we have any sort of timeline when the new services will be integrated? So I want to know. And going back to the contact system, obviously, before it was created, there was a certain number of people, full-time employee, working there. Has this number decreased since you started using that system?
Thank you for your questions. Let me try and answer it in one go, if I can remember. You're testing my brain now, doing three questions in one. So we were the first council to use AWS, so Amazon Web Services, to do our front-facing customer contact. So in answer to the last question, is we have substantially reduced budgets because we've had less people answering the telephone over the last 2 years, and we continue on that journey. So that's the ability. People ring up, they get a message back, they fill out a form, so they're not interacting with us as much. And we've done that across a lot of our services, and making sure they're end to end where possible. So we've substantially reduced the resources over time, but we're at the point now where we are, Darren and I and my team, we're looking at what's the next step. So with the recognition that generative AI has come on board, you'd have seen, again, when you're doing things in your normal life outside being a councillor, me being an officer, you're using web chat with other companies. So we want to bring in more sophisticated technology into the council, and that will again drive more efficiency savings, because people will less need to talk to an individual, and then more be able to do things by web chat. Also, we'll be able to look at how do we re-engineer our processes so they're truly end-to-end, so you don't need to interact with a human being, because you'll be able to do everything digitally. That means we are looking at our options at the moment. We'll be moving to a tried and tested solution. So we're looking at solutions that are out there at the moment, and we're looking at, in terms of where we are as a council, and I think across public services we make the mistake that we're actually different. We're actually pretty much all the same. All local authorities are pretty much all the same. We're slightly different in our political colour. We're slightly different if we're a council or a district or a unitary. But actually, we want to take good examples of things out there. All councils collect bins. So actually, there are called regular service patterns. So we're looking at how do we introduce some of those into the council to improve the offer we've got at the moment. So our offer is pretty good at the moment, but we strive for excellence, and this strategy demonstrates that we want to go further faster in terms of what we're doing. We want to become more efficient, i.e. generate more savings. We want to deliver a better customer experience. And we will be using... We'll be using expertise and companies that are tried and tested out there. Obviously, for commercial reasons, I'm not going to talk about the particular companies and the particular products out there because we are in commercial negotiations at the moment. But the real aim is, if you can save money, you can drive a better customer experience. That's a win-win for everybody, and that's where we'll be going over the next 2 years. And I'm really delighted that this strategy describes it, but also the Cabinet have invested in this as a key priority for the Council, and that is, by the administration, that is some very forward thinking and some smart thinking about looking at what do good public sector organisations look like in the future.
All right, thank you. Right, Councillor Mathers, then Councillor Cawthorne, then Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chair. You're looking at a recently new user of Borough Box, currently working through the autobiography of Eddie Izzard, and it is, as Matthew describes, very useful and very handy, and something that has changed how I now consume audiobooks, etc., and help my wallet a little. But I equally have my daughters who, at the weekend just gone, were fascinated by the negatives in photos, because we've got some old boxes out to sort out. And there is a drive in younger people to experience more of the physical, just as there are in a number of our residents that desire to have personal experience. And I think there is definitely a fine balance that in this strategy I can see the ambition of the officers in wanting to introduce into local authority something that pushes us forward, but the balance for me still needs, within the strategy, there still needs to be some aspects of it that still need calibrating. So for example, Agile is fantastic. We can quickly move on to something, but we know we've had some recent software as councillors, for example, GOS, which has been brought in and for us isn't working, and we haven't seen the agility to move it forward. So it's how do you ingrain in those more recent decisions, things that have been purchased, etc., but we haven't seen the agility. I think also there's the KPIs are all written on spend as the measure, which concerns me, because I honestly believe that we need to focus on the quality assurance as a KPI as well. So I'd really ask that you could reconsider your KPIs so it's not just monetary. It sends a bad message to residents, I think, if we just make our KPIs monetary based because they worry about experience, even if it is essential for the council's sustainability. But there's definitely some concern for me when it's all about reducing this, reducing that, and a monitoring on spend. Because if you're someone who's engaged with the AWS system, which is very useful, there are moments where you can go down an avenue with it where you answer 2 or 3 questions and then it hangs up on you because the answer isn't on the phone, it's online. But actually your query needs to be dealt with on the phone. You need that person engagement. You need that complex situation to be resolved. And in the digital strategy, it talks about simple processes being achieved by self-serving residents and customers. And I have no problem with that objective, but many of our residents as councillors we experience have complexities. So it would be useful to understand more, not about the complexities of digital inclusion, but in the strategy finding out the complexities of how do we deal with these cases when they are complex. So for example, a housing case, the change from Jigsaw to Locator for homeless prevention has resulted in residents no longer being able to get real-time updates on their housing case, even if it was logging into Jigsaw and going, my housing plan isn't complete, or actually, no, this is the document that's outstanding. What happens at the moment, and happy to go through some of the digital exclusion versions in getting to the point where you have got access to the portal offline, but you put all your information, you set up your account, you put your information in and you hear nothing. And the fear and anxiety that puts into homeless residents, it is something I don't think many of us have real lived experience of. And that is something that we need to understand as councillors day in, day out. Housing is a challenge nationwide, regionally, but we are making it worse by making it contactless in that sense. People, contactless. And the other one, and so that for me is really around maybe we need to change some of the wording around customer need, understanding customer need, and also understanding customer experience in that that is part of the customer need as well. That as part of the journey, there needs to be that reassurance. If you've got maybe this is for the next item, but if you've got a resident who's persistently ringing in, it may not just be because their bin is missed. It may be that there's another social need or anxiety that needs addressing, and we are their port of call as the council. And I guess it's those sort of, how do we build into our customer need that customer need of experience and stuff. And
all right, let's deal with those first.
Okay.
No, thank you, and always insightful and pertinent questions. So let me try and answer those. So let me answer them one by one, and thank you for the feedback on the KPIs. I completely accept what you're saying. I think that's a really good steer, and we're going way to look at it. I think we're trying to get the balance of, at the moment, what we can easily measure versus the things that we want to measure in the future, and making sure we've got a consistent baseline and targets and measures. So we are looking at that kind of quality dimension is something that we'll factor into the actual strategy that goes to cabinet. So definitely we'll have a look at that. So appreciate that. And I think you're right about the balance of about the kind of lived experience and the personal touch versus the digital experience is really important, and recognising that whilst you more engage with the residents groups, you understand the persona groups, understanding there's different personas within our communities that need a slightly different approach. So this is definitely not a one size fits all for everybody. So what we're trying to do with the funding situation that we are at the moment is to take away that 60, 70, 80% of people that can do stuff themselves, and then using our resource to flip it around for that personal experience or that joined up experience. So there's some really good examples. So we've created a data platform. So at the moment, when you're a customer, you're coming into us for that thing that you want as an individual. We want to move away from that and understand what you need in totality as a human being, as a resident or a household. So we'll be able to connect that information and see what support that resident or that household needs across the council services. I mean, you typically see it in local government, but also across place, is there's bounce off between services, bounce off between statutory partners. So by having better evidence and connected data, we'll be able to have more purposeful, more meaningful conversations with those residents to help them both first time in the thing that they've rung us up about, but also we'll be able to see their complexity of their needs and support them as a family. We'll also be able to take the flip of that as we'll have better data about individuals to be able to think about the prevention agenda. So what things we can do to help those individuals to be able to surface their needs at an early stage. And then you start getting into the predictive analytics to be able to pick up issues before they even become issues. So we're really focusing on understanding our customers much better, and it's the stuff that people don't see behind the scenes that we're using to drive better decisions as officers. In terms of agility, I mean, I would slightly disagree with you. I think on the GOS system, and I recognise that it's not a Rolls-Royce system, and some people will say it doesn't work. It definitely does work, but it's not perfect, and it's not. We could be investing hundreds of thousands more in having a slightly better experience for members. But we do change it, so I would say that's an incorrect assumption because it does have agility, and I've had feedback from members. We've gone to change the system on the basis of feedback, and back to the previous question is understanding what we're doing is we change our systems all the time based on feedback on residents' needs, on our complaints. So we're always taking that feedback. We're always changing our systems, but we recognise that we have to prioritise those against a set of needs, and we've not got a bottomless pit of money. So what we're trying to do is prioritise the right things at the right time first, recognising that systems don't work perfectly all the time. Systems do go wrong, and they're not always perfect aligned to customer needs. What we strive to do is fix the key ones, make sure they're responsive, and improve them all the time, and we do that through the GOS system. In terms of customer need and customer experience, again, I think that's a very shrewd example of understanding the difference between the two and making sure that we do improve our customer experience. Again, it's a big driver, and customer experience is more than digital, because people think about digital as that stuff we do online, right? Customer experience is the courtesy when someone out in the field talks to a resident. It's when people pick up the phone. It's how we respond to a complaint. And again, as I'm accountable for that, I take on board the comments that I get and the feedback that we have from complaints is we don't always get everything right. You know, we're not always delivering the best customer experience for our residents all the time consistently. So we and Ian will cover this later. So we're improving what we do as officers to make sure we focus on learning and development. So we're equipping our officers to be able to give better customer experience. We're better understanding how we do that multifaceted approach when someone contacts us. So we're not doing handoffs between council services. We're really understanding our residents. But you know, fundamentally, we want to do this because we want to improve people's lives, and by using better data, by having better digital provision, and by understanding residents' needs, we're improving people's lives, and the investment in this strategy will help to improve people's lives. We could always invest more. We could always go more quickly. But that's the agility of what we do. We're constantly looking out in the sector. We're constantly learning from other people. We're constantly looking at sub-regionally, nationally, internationally. So we're constantly striving to take good examples of what's out there and improving what we do. And we always strive to do that on a daily basis. So we're a very committed team to understanding how we make improvements all the time. But we do have a plethora of council services. We do have a complex borough with a complex set of needs. So what we do is we strive to just get better every day, but we don't always get everything perfect. But we do absolutely improve our customer experience and our customer need every day, but we do make mistakes. And I'll be the first to put my hand up and say, when we make mistakes, we learn from it, we get better tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you. A quick one. Just an observation. The Councillor Mills forward refers to 22 to 26, but of course we've got 24 to 27. That's not really a question, but you may care to comment. I assume one just needs updating. My question really is around whether there are any key deliverables on the way to 27. So it may be within the report and presentation. I couldn't find it. And maybe it's my fault, but are we saying, well, this is a journey that we'll complete in 27? Are there things we can expect to see in place before then, in some respects? Is there any more of a timetable than this?
So this is purposely a strategy. It's not the plan itself. So we have the plan that underpins this. So in terms of this is the digital strategy. So this is a reflection of the council strategy, which is 22 to 26. Obviously, the digital strategy is 24 to 27. So spans the electoral period. But this is a vision. This is a strategy for the next 3 years. So in terms of the big deliverables are, number one, we'll be re-engineering our customer experience. So that will be providing a new website, that will be providing new automation, so people could be able to do web chat. We'll be able to use AI at our front door. So that's a big change in what residents will see, and a completely redesigned website as well to make sure it's more modern, more effective in the way that we give out information, but more responsive to resident needs. So as Darren said, they'll be able to get the information they need, but particularly we'll be able to be more proactive in terms of giving information out to residents rather than them coming in and seeking information themselves. So that's doing things like push out notifications. One of the big deliverables is our data platform. So the slightly unsexy stuff that nobody sees, but really important in terms of every business and every kind of organisation in the country is improving the way it uses data. We're blessed as a local authority. We've got lots of data. We've got lots of data about our residents, how we use it to drive better decisions. So we're putting down a data platform that will span across a single view of our households and our residents. So that will be used to drive better decisions for our residents moving forward. Third deliverable is digital inclusion. I've talked about the recycling of kit, but a digital inclusion programme that will span across the period of doing this. Again, recognising that while we invest in our digital infrastructure for the majority of our residents, we need to support our vulnerable people better. So a digital inclusion approach. And we talked about connectivity as well. So making sure we've got a connected borough. So there's some big deliverables in there. But fundamentally what sits, I think, within the strategy is the agility. So we will constantly be reviewing our council services on a regular basis, and we'll have a rolling programme of more efficiently, more effectively and digitising our council services as we go along. We can't do them all straight away. That's completely unrealistic, but we've got a programme of change which will be aligned to the bigger services which have the biggest budgets, that have the most impact on residents. So we'll be going through the big services. whilst doing small things, both things that the residents see, but also recognising we want to be more efficient in the way we run our own organisation. So I talked a little bit at the start about us being as productive as possible. For example, you can now book all the rooms in the council seamlessly via an app. So it's really easy, whereas previously we had EAs and PAs running around booking rooms. It caused a lot of inefficiency. So we want to be more efficient in the way we're demoing Copilot, which is Microsoft's AI generative tool. We've completed our first pilot, and that's delivered 10% productivity savings across the council for the first pilot group. So if you quantify that, that's delivered about £5,000 worth of financial benefit per staff member, so that's a 10% benefit. I had it myself, lucky enough. But that's in terms of it's been quicker and easier to do some of the repetitive and we talk in the report about, the Microsoft CEO talks about the drudgery of work. We're trying to take that drudgery away. So as officers, we're spending our time supporting our residents in the best possible way, not doing back office administrative tasks. So there's a lot of deliverables in there. What I won't pretend to do is know everything about what digital, what technology or what data is going to look like in 2027. I always think it's really difficult to write a strategy and write a plan for the next 3 years when technology is moving so quickly. We're seeing a lot of stuff out in the sector at the moment. Once it's built, it's moved on. So what you don't want to spend too much time is, in the old days, spending 1-2 years doing a project and then coming back to it in a few years. You're constantly improving services. You're constantly swapping contracts and providers. So this is a strategy, which is why we haven't gone into the detail, is because I'd probably be doing something very different if I could understand technology in the next 3 years and understand really what that looks like. So again, the back of this is making stuff better for residents, improving people's lives. That is the biggest deliverable out of this strategy, not the technology. It facilitates making people's lives better.
All right, thank you. Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll make this quick. Thank you, Matthew and Darren, for quite a comprehensive report. I'd like to just focus on the fourth work stream, building digital capability and inclusion, and in particular the inclusion point. How many of our residents, for them, English is not their first language. How many different languages does our sort of websites support? And for something like automated voice and web chat, especially the web chat, does it support Cyrillic languages? Because again, there might be residents might want to sort of chat in their first language, which isn't English. And is this supported? And if not, are there plans to sort of roll this out in the future? And lastly, just sort of double clicking on residents with disabilities, do the tools and technology work well with sort of text to voice software? So people who are visually impaired, they can sort of use the services, aren't excluded. So just to get a bit more information on that would be quite useful. Thank you very much.
So I'll take that. Brilliant question. So in terms of translation, we've actually just turned that live on our website. So there's at least over 100 languages. If you go on the top on any page, you can go translate and select the language that you want, and that works perfectly well. It uses Google Translate, so that's now live. In terms of web chat, we don't have that yet, because actually we don't have web chat deployed across many of our pages. Only 1 or 2 services which doesn't have translation services. But the next version that Matthew said will have translation services in there. In terms of accessibility, we recognise that there are some issues with accessibility on our website. So there's some guidelines called WCAG. I won't go into the technical jargon of it, but essentially that means that we need to be accessible to screen readers, all the technology that you just referenced. So it's getting rid of things like PDFs on the website. Where you have pictures on the website, there needs to be descriptive text in there so screen readers can take on that technology, and that's what we're going to have in the next version of the website, is all of that. We're striving to be completely accessible so residents can access our services, whether English isn't your first language. If you have a disability, it doesn't matter. You should be able to access our services. So some of that we already have, and some of that's in the plan for the next, I'd say, 6 to 12 months.
And I'll add to that, and it's one of the beautiful things about technology when you can see someone speaking in a different language. It translates to English if you've got your operative as English, and then they will answer the question back and it will translate it back into the language. Technology is marvellous. It breaks down so many barriers of what we're doing. And again, as an organisation, we're making a shrewd investment on accelerating our journey in that space, because we are really breaking down the barriers by being able to use the technology to help people access our services in a much better way. And that's just going to get better across more languages. You see it with Google Translate and within ChatGPT and within the Microsoft stack is the onboarding of the very different sets of languages, and we have a very diverse community with lots of sets of languages. Previously it was only doing 7-8 core languages. As Darren said, now that's expanded massively. So imagine what it's going to be like in 2 years. The accessibility issue that we've had over the previous years and decades in public services have been broken down month by month, and again, I find that really exciting that we've been able to help people in a much better way. So it's hugely positive. But we do need to build a new website. We recognise that. Again, I recognise that the website we've got is not perfect. Right? It's not terrible, but it's not brilliant. This strategy says we want to get to brilliant, and we will get there. But it's investment, hard work, and understanding our customers, and again, using that agile, iterative approach is just getting better and better every day. So, a great question.
A sort of digital Tower of Babel kind of thing. You can use that, it's fine. You can use that for free. All right, Councillor Mathers and Councillor Garg.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose continuing on from that, so my thinking is about a couple of people that that have had experience with the council services, where they found something that doesn't work for them, a change that has meant that because they're partially sighted, they don't have the money to invest in some of the stuff on their computer, so they're using their mobile. So getting access to a service via an email just automatically stops their engagement with the council. They call into customer services, and they would say that with better data and better decisions in mind. That's not always handy, because you want the data that you can analyse and in the nice, comfortable formats we have. How are those messages, and how are we capturing those voices? And within the strategy, it equally talks about working with partners and other stakeholders to better understand our areas. There is a lot of opportunity for the engagement team. There's a lot of opportunity with the voluntary sector partnership team. There's a lot of opportunity with business forums and other bit. You're one team, sitting alongside some others. I understand that, but how do you ingrain a culture within the council? How is this strategy going to ingrain a culture in the council that means that data that is essential, those little nuggets that come through that you'd love to capture, but no, they don't come through as regularly because people are focusing on resolving issues, or the voices in the community through resident associations, other spaces and places where it's not as streamlined as gathering things on a survey or through people's interactions with the website. I'm very limited on my understanding of technological gathering of data, but let's assume that's the world. I just want to understand more how the strategy is going to change that mindset of this is. I mean, I know Ian for years has been trying to get people to write compliments down in different teams, and so it would just be interesting to see how this is going to change the culture of how the council works and how residents can engage in help troubleshoot.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and culture is always an interesting one in any organisation. And what I see within the digital strategy is accelerating the change in the culture in our organisation to be more customer focused, more understanding about our resident needs, more open to be challenged by residents. I think in understanding feedback, taking feedback, and doing something with it. We're not there at the moment as an organisation, and we haven't been for a number of years. And I think through this digital strategy, we're trying to put a stake in the ground and saying this is how we want to be different as an organisation. But again, I'll recognise that we're not going to get there straight away. This is a journey we're going on over 3 years. The more that we understand and we take data and we use data, we will just improve year on year how we do it. And within that, we're not. I can't sit here and guarantee we're going to be able to understand all the voices in the community straight away. We're all going to be able to make sure they're on our data platform or understood. There's always a balance of that kind of qualitative and quantitative information that is always quite difficult to capture. I think what's really important, and again, I'll go back to and I'll say the same thing, is we've got less resources as an organisation. This is using our resources that we've got in a better way to be able to support our communities. So by doing that we'll be seeking to more engage, capture the information, but also, again, I think you're quite right, break down those barriers within the services, understanding what households, customers, residents need, what communities need. The more that we can gather data about our communities, our areas, our wards, our super output areas, our collections, our streets, we'll be able to target services in a different way. Most local authorities operate in a focused way in terms of looking at areas and communities, but that's often done by, it's not done by accident, or it's not done by chance, it's done by understanding, but it's not necessarily, it's not done by using advanced data analytics and good customer feedback to really target streets, collections of households. If you think about areas, and it's a slightly different point, we have quite a lot of debt as a council, for example, so understanding actually who owes us money, what areas do they live in, what sort of households are they, but are we collecting debt looking at that one household has got that one debt collection issue, or actually when you look at the data, if they got 8 different debt collection issues, and actually collecting debt might not be the right thing. We might want to have a conversation about how do we support that family or that household in a very different way. So it starts to pose different questions about what we do, and you're ingesting that information by understanding our council services, understanding our feedback, and then you're using it to put in different interventions about that community, that family, that service. So we're absolutely on that journey. And all the things you've talked about are the things that we're striving to succeed, but we're not quite there. But we're getting better and better. I see it every day, every week. We're getting better and better at our use of data, our use of feedback. But as an organisation, we do need to get out and talk to people more about what services they need. We do need to take the data that we've got, because we're not using the data that we've got either from complaints or from the people that ring up. We're not using that. We're using that precious information as well as we can do to help design our services. That's where we strive to design our services in a different way moving forward through this investment. So we're getting there. I'd say, we're mid-table. If I was to use a football analogy, we strive to be the Man City. We don't want to be a Fulham, for example. So that's where we strive to be. And through this investment, I hope we can get there. But at the back of it is, again, we want to improve people's lives and we want to make a difference to people's lives. And that is through the interactions, that's through the data, and that's through better digital services. And I think that's what describes it here. But I absolutely take your feedback, and we'll go and look away and improve this before it goes to Cabinet.
Not sure that using Man City is quite such a brilliant analogy, given their problems with fair play and all the rest of it, but never mind. Right, finally on this topic, Councillor Garg.
So, sorry, just wanted to point out more of it's a one council approach, but if you look at all the different services that the council offer, I think you're going, in some areas, for example, adult social care, you're going to be quite limited. So are you going to be looking at taking different approaches dependent on the different services? So someone with mental health issues and things like that, you can't just rely on the digital side and the data. So it was just to point that out, and whether you would be looking at that sort of thing.
So yeah, of course, thanks, good question. We will be tailoring services dependent on the cohort of users. So adult social services being a prime example. I think I'll go back to the point I made earlier. It's about trying to free up resource. So letting those who can self-serve to free up the resource so we can actually help the most vulnerable. So whether it be people who need that additional time, help, support, joining that journey, because, if you come to us with one need, perhaps you need, several kind of lines of support. So it will be a tailored journey. It won't be, to coin Matthew's phrase, a one shoe or one size fits all. We will look at those journeys and then iterate. It's that agile approach. As we take feedback, whether it be from complaints, or just general web feedback, we will try and build that back into services and design those types of ways out, because you just can't have a linear kind of approach to service delivery.
And
All right, thank you.
Can I just ask, and it's more than one council, it's one area as well, because, you know, we work with lots of statutory partners, we work in a big and complex area, and, you know, particularly in things like social services, things like hospital discharges. We want our digital processes to work and our data to work across services. Now, that's trickier, it's pretty difficult. You've got data sharing agreements, but more fundamentally this helps to break down barriers of what we want to do within our communities. We want to share more data with our voluntary sector partners. We want to be able to work with more of our statutory partners. We want to work in a more of a place dynamic to support the people, recognising that people often bounce between statutory services, both within the council and outside of the council as well. So again, we want to use technology and data to start breaking down those barriers. Again, we recognise that we're not there as an organisation. Most organisations aren't, but we're on a journey to get better at this. And, you know, that's not just one council. We want to be one Hillingdon as well.
All right, thank you. Chairman's prerogative now. You were saying earlier on, in fact, right at the beginning, and you mentioned new people coming into the borough, new residents coming in. I just wondered if there was a sort of kind of digital folder that new people coming in could access, which told them, because as you say, we're not very good at telling people what the good stuff is and what the positives are. And I just wondered if there's a ready and easy access that if you as soon as you sign up to pay council tax or purchase a property or rent a property or whatever and become a resident, there's an easy access digital information that tells you about the stuff that's available and gives you essentially a checklist of all of the sort of services that you can take advantage of. It may only be in brief, because you then might want to explore all sorts of things, but at least it's kind of a core set of things that are available.
So I'll go back to the kind of answer I gave earlier around when you move into the borough, it's not just about signing up for council tax, it's what local events are there, planning consultations, where's your local park, all the good things that we offer as a council, that's what you'll get. So those kind of questions around what's your family composition will lead certain questions. So, you have a child of school age, okay, here are your nearest schools, here are your nearest clubs, here are your nearest theatres, proactively, when we have an event on, proactively telling people a week in advance, this is what's coming up. That's exactly what we're striving for. It's not just sign up for council tax and then go and find out yourself what we offer. It's here is your tailored kind of service offer and what we can help you do. That's exactly where we're going to get to.
It's a bit like when you get these rather infuriating things from very large organisations that say, you've asked about this, would you like that? There's certain things which are useful and certain things which irritate you, but nevertheless having that very quick and very easy to access, as I say, folder, pocket, whatever you want to call it, of information is quite useful. All right, look, in the recommendations it says that the committee acknowledges the draft digital strategy, yes, and provides comments appropriate prior to its submission to the Cabinet on the 2nd of October. So we need to have a very short and very punchy sentence of some description to add to this, and then we'll move on to item 6. So I'm going to suggest that the committee adopt this, that the committee welcome the advances and positive strides made in this digital strategy, at the same time recognising the need to make resident experience with the council ever more effectively digital. In addition, to actively supporting those residents less able to access digital services. And we put that in as our sort of comment on the back of this. Councillor Mathers.
Well, I do think it's worth just noting some of the concerns around KPIs needing to focus on residents and not just cutting back on spend and things like that. And that may evolve from now to the Cabinet meeting. And also just some of those concerns around the balance needed to ensure that we are truly engaging not just in those who are digitally unable, but people with complex needs, and not just providing we should provide the quick wins, and we are, but there needs to be some thought in the strategy around culture and complexity,
Well, I think to an extent, because it's got to be fairly short. It can't be very detailed in that sense. But I think the bit about, in addition, actively supporting those residents less able to access, highlights that point that you make about those types of residents and dealing with it in that way. Any other comments, Councillor Kerlick, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. As a committee, could we ask to have progress reports, let's say every quarter, which services were integrated, what feedback you received, or any improvements were made?
There's a rolling...
the intention is to do an annual update on where we are with, the ability for you to call in particular services that we're doing. So we intend to come back and check our progress against the strategy. But again, recognising the strategy, may well change over a period of time in terms of the delivery of it. So we intend to come back and Councillor Mathers, we're look at the KPIs and we're amending them ahead of Cabinet. Okay, so in fact, when Matthew first came to talk to us about this, we did, and you weren't on the committee at the time, but we did agree that he would come back every now and again to update us, and this is sort of one of those updates. So that's going to, oh, bloody hell. That's going to, electricity and water is not a good mix, is it? But we're okay. I haven't fizzed or anything. That's okay. We just need some cloth or something, or... Anyway, so those that's the proposal that we put this little paragraph in and add that to the whole picture for the Cabinet. Oh, bless your heart. Okay. Oh, you're using all your... Okay, that's okay. Oh, I didn't blow up. Good. All right, let's... oh, gosh.
The microphone's okay.
That's much better. Let's move on to item 6 then, which is the Annual Complaint and Service Monitoring Report, 1st of April 23 to 31st of March 24. I think Matthew's going to introduce this and then hand over to Ian.
Thank you, Chair. So we bring this report to you every year. So those of you new to the committee, this is the complaints information for the financial year 23-24. So we publish what we do in terms of complaints and members' inquiries. So Ian will talk you through our complaints process, a little bit about what's changed recently, and some of the trends we're seeing. But I think from my perspective is often the word complaint has got that negative connotation, and of course it does. Again, I'm passionate about, I use the information to improve our services, and Ian will describe some of the things that we've taken complaints and we've used it to improve our services. We're always going to get complaints as an organisation, given how many services we provide, our customer base, our vulnerable customers. So we're looking at whether the trends are right. So are we reducing the number of complaints, how well we compare against other local authorities, but also how we're using it to improve our services. So I'll hand over to Ian to talk a little about the context of how we do complaints, but also about our trends.
Thank you, Matthew. Good evening, everyone. The document I provided is quite lengthy. There's a lot of information in there, and if I went through it in detail, I think we would be here a little while. So I'm just going to canter through the main bits of information that I think you need to be aware about. So I suppose starting with the statistics, I'm really looking at page 33, Appendix B. It provides you with an overview of the complaints process, I suppose, and the different stages of the complaints. So in terms of the first part of the complaint process is the informal complaints, which we now call service improvements. That's reduced from 5,176 in last year to 3,729 this year, this past year. So that's a reduction. The main areas that is reduced in are antisocial behaviour and waste. In terms of the stage 1 complaints, that again has gone down from 816 in the previous year to 681 this year. At stage 2, it's gone up from 121 to 180. The main areas where it's gone up is in housing. The main issues there people raised were about locata banding, the allocation of accommodation, and a lot of people wanted to know information on the whole about the housing process, I suppose, more in the type of complaints that we received. In terms of the Ombudsman investigation, that's gone up from 46 in 23 to 65. I think whilst it's gone up, I think the main thing I would emphasise on that is that 40 of the 65 Ombudsman investigations did not investigate. It's an odd term that the Ombudsman uses, but it means that they've looked at it, but they feel that on the sort of superficial look that they've looked at, that there isn't any merit in terms of pursuing it. So although there's 65 and it's gone up, there's a big chunk where they've actually done very little because they believe that we've actually done the right thing in terms of that. The compliments are largely the same. It's gone from 245 in 22-23 to 216, so it's come down slightly, but not too much. In terms of the members' inquiries, as you know, the members' inquiry process was changed in the 1st of April 23. So for the first full year of information that we held, so from 22-23, the volume of members' inquiries is 6,236, and there was 5,555 service requests. So when you add it all up, that's 11,791 inquiries of some form that's been submitted by members, which is nearly 4,000 more than the year before, or 3,000 roughly. So a significant number that's occurred. In terms of this report, and I think one of the things that Councillor Mather's raised is about culture and what's happening. I think since Matthew's come in, and you'll see it in my report, there's more about service improvements, lessons learned, because we're trying to cascade that across the organisation in terms of if we're getting something wrong, we just don't want to keep repeating it because it's not helping anyone. So it's about what do we learn from that complaint and how is it that we make sure it doesn't happen again. And within my report, there's a whole raft of changes that have been introduced by way of service improvements in all different areas. There's also a number of lessons learnt in all areas again, which sort of identifies the different things that are happening. One of the things that I think Darren touched on, and I think we use the term within the digital intelligence, is about the golden thread in terms of when we get inquiries, whether it's just a contact that we receive by the phone or it's some form of digital contact, we will actually got a thread that follows from that to service improvements, to complaints. So all the feedback, what we're trying to do is move towards one customer experience control report, which essentially provides that data and captures it in a nice way. We're not there yet. That's something that we're sort of working towards. One of the things that this committee will need to have is some assurance that the complaints procedures that we have are fit for purpose, I suppose. And one of the things I would say to you is that as of the 1st of April 24, both the Housing Ombudsman and the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman introduced complaint handling changes, which impacted on every single council across England and Wales, which required us to make changes to the way we handled complaints. And I can give you that assurance that actually, as of the 1st of April, all the changes that they required by the Ombudsman have been introduced and have been implemented. And when I look at some of our neighbouring councils, that's not always been achieved. So I can give that assurance that we're actually moved on and that we're actually processing what the Ombudsman requires us to do. The other thing that I think on page 32, it's got the complaint handling codes under item 8. And what it does is it just tells you of some of the changes that we've had to make as a result of the Ombudsman's requirements of us as an organisation. And I think that's been implemented. I could go into more detail in the report, but I think perhaps it's leaving it to you to ask questions. I can talk to you about the different complaint handling processes that are in place, whichever you want me to do.
All right, thank you. I think it's interesting that as the digital experience, to sort of meld the two together, as it were, as the digital experience increases, then maybe the service request side of the equation in terms of inquiries probably ought to go down, because the number of abilities of residents to be able to deal with stuff themselves or deal with requests themselves, as opposed to going through councillors who then make a service request on behalf of a resident, that's already being done as a consequence of the engagement with the digital strategy. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would say that. And the other thing I would add is that I think we talked about those more vulnerable people earlier on. One of the things the Ombudsman require of the council is that we make those adjustments as and when people contact us. For example, we've now got a reasonable adjustment log, so every time an adjustment is requested, we have to keep a note of it, what we actually did, so there's a record of that. Where someone cannot, for whatever reason, access our system digitally, we have to make adaptations and adjustments so that we can actually, take on board whatever the issues they're raising and process that. One of the challenges that we always face is for those people who don't read and write, and it's about how do you provide that response to them. So there are measures in place to actually deal with lots of the people who would struggle to access our service digitally.
All right, Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you Ian for quite a very comprehensive report. I found it very interesting reading it through. You did partially answer my question actually in what you just said, but I just wanted to double click on the lessons learnt that you've described on page 37. In terms of how quickly are lessons learnt implemented, I know you mentioned like the Ombudsman almost like immediately when they make like a recommendation, but ones that aren't received or given in from that channel, do we do this like every 6 months, every year, every quarter, or is it as soon as a lesson, I don't know, it gets to like stage 5, we have to like implement it straight away, this lesson learned? So anything you can give further on that would be really useful. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, lessons learned, it's got to happen immediately. So, if you leave it 6-7 months, it's just too late. The momentum's lost. So, what happens in terms of where a lesson's learned, whether it's identified within the council or it's identified by the Ombudsman, what happens is those lessons are shared with the team, with the senior leaders, so that they're aware of what the changes are. Then what happens within my own service is that there is a little note made saying, this is a lesson learned, what are you doing about it? And then so that in 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, 4 weeks' time, whatever it is, we then go back and say, what have you actually done to actually correct that, whatever that mistake is. But I think the important thing is that sometimes the crucial thing is that it's shared across the organisation, so that we make sure that if this same mistake is made, it doesn't occur somewhere else. So I guess that's the sort of the key message and action that we would take from that. It has to happen almost as soon as the issue is identified. In the majority of times, it's actually identified by the officers within the council, and we'll deal with it. So, for example, what happens is in a repair service, they've actually got a log. So every time an issue is identified, it goes in the log, what action they take, so it's noted within that system. But the other thing that the GOS complaint system is, it actually allows you to actually put the amount of compensation you pay, whatever the redress is, whatever the lessons that are learned. So it's got it within the system. And then what happens is that information is then extracted from the system. And what's happening from tomorrow is actually there are demonstrations being given by myself and other officers to all officers across the council, in which it shows them how that information about their service. So real-time data, they just have to click on a button, which then provides them with information about what the volume of complaints, but also what the lessons learned, what the changes are. So it's trying to pick all that information up. So whether you're at senior level or a junior level, you'll have that same data that you can capture, and we're actually showing people how to use the system in order to capture that information, in order to identify that information and progress it.
All right, thank you. Councillor Cawthorne.
Just a quick one on the service request. When this package was sold to us a year or two ago, one of the selling points was that with a service request, it will go straight to service team, delivery teams, cutting out people in the middle, and they do quicker responses. I mean, what's our general sense of how that is working? Is it living up to expectations, do we think?
In terms of the service request, the way it works is as you describe it. So if you submit a service request, it does go straight to the actual service. The only time I've found issues with that is sometimes the wrong service is identified and it goes to wrong, so you then have to intervene to actually change it. But generally, the system, in terms of members' inquiries, it works in that same principle. It goes from yourself to the service without my team intervening in that, other than if there's a mistake.
Matthew, I think you wanted to come in on something there.
Yeah, I mean, to cover both those areas, I mean, I think Ian talks about how we're much better using the data that we've got around complaints and service requests to help shape our services. And once they're in our data platform, we visualise them. It helps you take early stage complaints and look at thematic groupings of them, where either that's a group of informal complaints in an area, or you're seeing some trend around a location or a particular seasonality of complaints. So it helps you to look at almost that predictive analytics approach of understanding the data that sits behind those lower stage complaints, rather than addressing the more serious complaints when they go through the stage process through to the ombudsman, where you have to address them and you have to do that real-time feedback. What I'm trying to do is capture the information at an earlier stage, where they're at the more informal stage one complaint stage, and understanding what are they telling us about our services at the moment. And in terms of service requests, and this is where things like generative AI will help us, for things like service requests, members' inquiries, but also FOIs, and complaints, is we tend to get asked similar questions as an organisation all the time. Therefore, we'll be using generative AI in the future to help write the answers to those questions, rather than having to answer each question from fresh every time, because we will have a set of data about all the questions and all the answers that we've had over the previous years, and we'll be using that to more effectively and more efficiently answer those questions by looking back at the historical records. So that won't say that it will answer everything, so you won't get a bot answering all. It'll still be a human checking that, but we'll be able to do the first draft or check the information or go back and see what we're doing. Also, where we're going, and this is slightly off topic, is we want to publish more data as an organisation. So we want to give people the data to be able to find out stuff for themselves, rather than going through the informal or formal process by contacting us. So the more that we're publishing data, because we're getting very typical requests of stuff that actually people can find out themselves, but we could actually help residents and customers by publishing more information about us as an organisation. So again, we want to be more open, we want to be transparent, we want to be more understanding resident needs, and we'll be able to do that more effectively. And therefore, in terms of how we're spending our precious resources, is we want to spend more on doing more service improvements and less on answering people's questions, because we want to do that more quickly and more effectively.
All right, thank you. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. So, in the spirit of thinking about how we can make the most of lessons learned, and from what I read from this report is that we know housing is a challenge at the moment, and there's been a huge number of complaints. I don't know how many of the previous years' ombudsman things weren't investigated, but it's normally quite a high proportion. I think you've been at as many committees as I have in terms of talking about these sort of subjects, so there's always similar trends, but it is higher this year. And I know that the committee with housing are doing a review on the housing process, and I do wonder, I know this now comes to us entirely for the whole council, and we are not experts in none of us are experts in all of the areas. We'd like to try. But I think with housing, there may be a need, if I may, through you, Chair, to make sure that some of the complaints and compliments feed into that review rather than it just coming here, so that it's not seen in isolation just for that specific area. That's a kind of food for thought. But I'm interested to know how you handle. So there were 40 investigations that weren't investigated. That doesn't necessarily resolve the issue for the resident. It just gives them an answer they don't want to hear. But there also may be a lesson learned in that. And I'm sure that the team doesn't just disregard the fact it went that far and we knew we were right, because that's not how this team works. But I'm intrigued to know how you still get out of that the lessons learned and how you still resolve the grievance that those 40 people have, as it were. And with the majority of them being housing, it's a tough environment to try and deliver that across. So I'm interested in kind of the human approach to how that's managed. I do also note with the Ombudsman reporting that the majority of ones where they were upheld or partially upheld are in what I would say were the people-focused areas. So the ones around parking, transport, green spaces, building control, they're not necessarily people-facing. They weren't upheld. There were, majority weren't. But when it comes to education, housing, children's and young people and adult social care and that, more of them proportionately were upheld. So there is clearly a theme in my mind around people having to go that far because there's a personal impact, there's an emotive kind of result and impact on their direct lives. I'm not saying that planning and highways and stuff doesn't have an impact on your life, but it's a lot more emotive when it's family and friends and antisocial behaviour and stuff when it feels personal. So just what support packages, if any, or what help is there, mediation is there for those residents who, I won't say unsuccessful in there, but who have got that far, but it's not resolved for them, the grievance.
Just before you deal with that, just looking at the 18 heads of responsibility that we have as in this committee, housing isn't one of them as a specific topic. So, but certainly offline, I can talk to the chairman of the relevant committees looking into this, and maybe they can have a bit of a conversation with Matthew about around that issue of housing and homelessness. All right, but if there's anything that you want to add in to Councillor Mace's observations, then please do.
In terms of the did not investigate, which is the Ombudsman stuff, 40 out of 65 did. What actually happens is when the Ombudsman receive a complaint from the complainant, whichever it is, we have to provide literally the same information that we would if it was upheld. So the Ombudsman then gets a mass of information. They look at it and then they decide whether they want to investigate or not. So although they've used the terminology "did not investigate," they've actually looked at it because they've made sure that all the different aspects are covered. Of those 40 that did not investigate, there will be, you're right, a proportion of those people who will feel upset, annoyed for whatever reason. What I would say though is of those 40, that the majority of them tend to be ones where it's a policy issue. So we've applied our policy and they're not happy with it. So the Ombudsman will generally take the line saying, well, actually, the policy's been applied. There's no point in us investigating it. The policy could be in parking. So, for example, when a PCN's been issued and someone's unhappy about the way we've actioned it or whatever, or applied it, or it could be housing, which is the majority, and that's the social housing allocation policy. So we would still give it the same effort to actually try and resolve it. And in the majority of cases, people will accept it. That that they've had their chance to all their information to be looked at, and particularly by the Ombudsman, who's independent, and the Ombudsman's taken the view that okay, there's nothing here to do. So we would always do that in terms of giving it the same effort. I think the thing that strikes me about housing in particular is that, and one of the lessons that we sort of need to build towards and learn is that when it comes to our website, we could help ourselves by putting it up some of the information that actually people are complaining about. So, for example, one of the communications that we're looking at is people, when they've been served with a notice saying they're going to be evicted, they're upset, they're worried, they don't know what to do, what's going to happen, what's their next stage. And actually having some information, which is just on the council's website saying, this is what will happen, this is what you need to do, could allay a lot of people's fears. So I think when Matthew talks about updating the website, getting it better, these are the type of things we need to do, and it could reduce the number of contacts, because why do people need to ring up if they've already got the answer to their question? Because it is a very emotive subject. You're about to leave your house, you'll lose your house. So things like that we could do more to help with.
All right, thank you. And finally on this subject, Councillor Banerjee.
Sorry. So just out of interest, are there SLAs around stage 1, 2 and 3 complaints? And if not, why not? And if there are, it'd be interesting to just get the data. So how long do people have to wait for us to resolve a complaint? Is it indefinite, or is it like a service request? Like I think 10 working days or something?
Yeah, it's as of the 1st of April, both Housing and the Local Government Ombudsman introduced their complaint handling codes, and they set really prescriptive requirements that we need to meet. So it's so at the service request stage, we need to respond within 10 working days. At the stage 1 complaint process, the response time frame is 10 working days for that, and in exceptional circumstances, it can be extended for another 10 working days. So it's got to be done in 10 working days to do that. In terms of the stage 2 complaint process, that needs to be dealt with within 20 working days, and it could be extended for a further 20 working days if that's necessary. But that only applies to the corporate complaints procedure. When it comes to the adult social care complaints procedure and the children's complaints procedure, they operate in slightly different ways. So with the adult social care complaints procedure, at stage 1, we need to respond within 20 working days, and after that, they go to the Ombudsman. When it comes to the children's complaints process, you've got the service request stage, but at stage 1, we need to respond within 10 working days, so that target remains there. But at stage 2, it requires the council to commission an independent investigator and an independent officer to investigate the complaint, and the maximum time frame for completing that is 65 working days. If they're not happy, if the person's not happy with that response, they then go to stage 3, which is a review panel, a bit like this, where people listen to what the complainant has to say, what the council has to say, and then they adjudicate on that. And the response time frame for that is 45 working days. The only thing that I think that I would just add to that is that the children's complaints procedure is the one procedure that I keep an absolute eye on, because the reason for that is because while stage 1s can be responded to by an officer like myself, but when you commission an independent person to investigate, it costs the council money to do that. So each investigation would cost in the region of 4,000 to 5,000 in total, and at stage 3 it will cost something similar. So it's when it comes to the children's complaints procedure, it's one that I keep my closest eye on, because it's the one that has the most impact on that. You'll notice it within the complaint report that I provided you is that we've had 6 stage 2 complaint investigations last year. Now, the anomaly within the system is the SEND team. The SEND team, whilst they're part of the children's services, when it comes to the handling of complaints, falls under the corporate complaints procedure. So we don't commission independent investigations for SEND complaints. But other than that, in the last 2 or 3 years, we haven't had a single stage 2 investigation. And that's, to be fair, to the skill of officers working in children's services and my staff in handling it. So it's the one area that I worry about most, that I keep my closest eye on, because at the end of the day, you've got young people involved. We need to make sure that we provide them with the right level of service, and whatever the issues that they've got, it's got to be dealt with, and it's got to be handled particularly sensitive, just as adult social care is. the corporate complaints are the bulk of them, but they tend to be more about services such as waste, things like that. That's where the vast bulk is.
All right, thank you. I did say the final question, but I'll take one more succinct and direct question from Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. I would very much do my best to honour that. Just, you spoke about lessons learned, you speak about the equalities training, but also the changes to the unreasonable and unreasonably persistent complainants. I just would really appreciate getting a bit of a summary of that. So there's been some experiences of people being asked not to report, residents and councillors, and there are definitely some residents who report to us or report generally persistently, but I just wanted to know what the balance was in terms of that policy when in its rewritten form.
I think the policy change was minor changes. What the policy change was that when it came to the restricted persons register and the approval of it, at the approval stage it had a director, a corporate director in there. The change was to head of service. So it was just that was the subtle change that happened. But in terms of your more wider question, the way it works is that the unreasonable persons policy and the restricted persons register are linked. So what generally happens is that where someone has abused the process, so for example, I'm currently dealing with someone who sends officers something like 6 or 7 emails a day. Now, the emails are not 2 or 3 lines, they're pages. And what's happening is that over a period of time, that's significant resource that's involved. So what then has to happen is that in that particular person is a submission has to be made to the head of service saying, look, there's been a significant volume of communications. We are asking your permission to put these persons on the restricted persons register for this reason. When that happens, we also have to say what the restrictions will be in terms of this particular, what needs to happen. In this particular case, the restrictions that will be asked of is no email contact with us. Maybe telephone calls, letters in writing, so that's fine. What then happens is it then goes to the head of service. The head of service has to consider all the facts. If they're agreeable to that and the request that's being made is in compliance with the unreasonable persons policy, then they approve it. A letter is then sent to that individual telling them why they've been put on the restrictions persons register, what the restrictions are, and then it also tells them how they can actually appeal that decision. So if they are unhappy, which they're likely to be, then they have the opportunity to appeal to the director, the corporate director, and set out their reasons why they shouldn't be put on the restricted persons register, or what's, or that the policy hasn't been applied correctly. So it's quite rigorous in terms of how it happens. I suppose your last question is how frequently does that happen? Not many, I would say. If you imagine the number of residents that we have within our borough, 290 odd thousand, there's about 25 to 30 people on the restricted persons register. So it's very small. So it's those people that have abused our processes. For some who have issued threats, and there are some who've waited outside our building and harassed staff, that follows a slightly different path. We need to go down the legal route, issue injunctions to protect yourselves and us really from their contact.
All right, thank you very much. And because I'm a benevolent and generous chairman, very, very, very quickly, Councillor Banerjee.
I will keep this short. So I just wanted to see, I didn't want this to get lost in the report. On page 33, you do mention compliments. And, that's it's not difficult. It's a difficult job. I just wanted to see, again, ask a question. For officers that maybe get compliments on a regular basis, is any recognition given to them? And, we talk about lessons learned when there are complaints. Are lessons learned shared when someone's successful? So they're doing a good job. What did they do well? How do they handle a difficult resident? The stool swings both ways, in my opinion. Yes, we get complaints, but you have listed we get compliments as well. And just a few words on that would be very appreciated. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, we had over 200 compliments, and I always think compliments are so valuable because there's nothing in it for the person, and to send that is, and there's many examples of compliments received. When a compliment's received, it's shared with the person, and it's shared with their manager and also the head of service and director. So everyone has sight of that. And you see the interaction that takes place between that service where they're saying, well done, Fred, for doing such a great job. And that happens as well. What I like about the GOS complaint system is that when someone actually wants to submit a compliment, it allows them to do that online. And when it comes through the system, it then one of my team or myself will then pass it on to the relevant head of service and the various people. So it's done electronically or in writing or verbally, whichever it is, and that information is captured.
All right, thank you so much. Right, both gentlemen, thank you very, very much indeed. As ever, we could have been here very much later and all night talking to you, but so far so good, and really interesting questions and answers. Thank you so much. Thank you. Right, we shall move on to the next item, which is the forward plan, which really to a large extent we can just note. I don't think there's anything on that. After that, it's the work programme. Now that we're back in business after the summer recess, as it were, interested to get some views, not now, but send them to me or Anisha, well, both of us really, about topics for deep dives and reviews, similar in a sense to the extent that we went into procurement, but some interesting topics. We've got those 18 heads of responsibility at the beginning of each agenda, and I think it would be good to... We did talk about looking at the transport and road safety issues a little while ago, and I'm quite keen to look at those. But any proposals for any proper reviews and significant reviews for this year or this season, as it were, very welcome. There is one thing I do need to say. Around about this time, we'd normally start talking and thinking about budgets. But all committee chairmen have been sent this note. As you know, there's a new corporate director of finance who is looking at the whole issue of finance structure and infrastructure. And budgets are being reviewed by the newly appointed corporate director of finance, who will consider how future financial performance is to be reported to us. So for the moment, we won't be getting, until that review has been undertaken, anything at the moment, and we will await to see the outcome of the review that the new corporate director has undertaken, and we look forward with great anticipation to that taking place. All right. Very quickly, Councillor Mathers.
Just on the multi-year work plan, assuming there is a meeting next month, there's no, is it missing or is there no meeting? I'm just confused as to what we were looking at next time.
That's right, so the next meeting is in November now. Thank you. Right.
Okay. Well, we may need to talk about that because there could be other topics that we could put in for an October meeting, which we normally have. So just because the one topic isn't there, we can still look at. I mean, it may be that it would be quite a good idea, quite a good one to use for considering major review topics and so forth. So it may be that I think maybe that we still schedule that meeting, but for different reasons, maybe. All right, thank you. Otherwise, anything else? If not, we will close the meeting. Thank you.